Hello, everybody. How you doing out there? So I'm often asked the question, "What is your favorite interview?" It's an impossible question to answer because I had so many of them. Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page and Brian Wilson, Steve Winwood, but certainly one of the top 10 I ever did was Pete Townshend. This is right around the time that the Kids Are All Right album is released, circa 1979. I flew to New York from my little Hollywood Hills pad, and met up with Pete on a rainy New York afternoon up in the suite in the hotel he was staying at, and he was amazing. Um, I have to tell you that the Who are one of my favorite bands ever. I think they're maybe the greatest rock band ever. I mean, people will tell you Zeppelin or the Stones, and those bands are remarkable. But the Who at their prime, I thought they were untouchable. Pete's writing and his sense of arranging, and as a singer, we don't need to talk about Tommy or Quadrophenia. Who's Next? One of the greatest records ever recorded, and I talked to Pete about that, and he sort of concurs, which made me feel really good about it. Just an amazing guy. As I mentioned, it was raining a lot there in New York. He was in Manhattan, and it was warm. That New York weather where it's warm but raining. And so I was walking down the street, and there was this little store, and they were selling umbrellas. And so I bought an umbrella, which I still have. So that is forever known now as the Who umbrella. One caveat, one of my favorite interviews ever. However, there was so much more I wanted to ask him. And, I listened to that interview, and you'll listen to it, and it was really good. It was really good. But I had so many of the things I wanted to ask him. But hey, I was lucky I ever had the one opportunity. So check it out. The Who's great leader Pete Townshend on a rainy afternoon in Manhattan, New York. See you, everybody. Bye.
Is it right? Quite possibly. Yeah. I would like to start with as far back as you can remember. Just when you first started playing, and if you can remember your early guitars and lessons, and just kind of a brief kind of musical history.
Well, I never had any lessons as such. My mother and father were both in the music business, and my father's mother and father were both in the music business, so I sort of... And my father's band was a dance band, popular dance band called the Squadronaires, that used to be an Air Force band, like the Glenn Miller Orchestra type thing, and then after the war became famous. Anyway, and I used to travel with them a lot before I went to school. In fact, I travelled with the band till I was about 7, so I sort of got an early taste of the road. But we didn't actually, there wasn't much music at home, only my dad maybe practicing his clarinet in the back room. We didn't have a very good record player, we had a really shitty radio, no piano in the house. And the only music I enjoyed till I was about 11, self-made, 12, was mouth organ. And I got a guitar. My grandmother bought me a guitar when I was 12 for Christmas, and it was just a really, really cheap guitar. And I broke a lot of strings on it, and it was finally when I got down to sort of just the D, the G, and the B were left. It was then that I broke through, because I learned a few chords. And essentially, most of the shapes are actually centered around those 3 strings. And so I played for about 6 months just on those 3 strings and learnt a lot of chords. And then finally, when I actually managed to get enough pocket money to buy the rest of the strings, I could suddenly play. It was really weird. I felt the and it all fitted into place. A couple of years later, not years later, I think in that year I got a banjo. a ukulele banjo, which I quite enjoyed for a while. No, it was a mandolin banjo. And then I got a small tenor banjo and I started to play in a trad group. And that's why I first worked with John Entwistle.
Mm-hmm.
He used to play trumpet and I used to play banjo in a small trad Dixieland band.
Mm-hmm.
And I played banjo for about 2 years. And then I found a reasonably good Czechoslovakian guitar, can't remember the name, and an acoustic. And I knocked about on that for a bit, and then the first actual guitar I owned was a Harmony single pickup Stratocruiser, it's called. And I sprayed that red. And the next decent guitar I had was when Roger, who used to be the lead guitar player in the band, he had a job, so he was able to afford a good guitar. He had an Epiphone Solid, and he let me buy that from him on easy payments when I took over lead guitar. It sort of brings me up to about, I should think, around 62.
Mm-hmm.
And by that time I was playing pretty good.
You were?
Yeah.
Were you listening to more records and more guitar players by that
I
time?
still didn't have a record player. I didn't get a record player until I went to... In my first year of art school, I started to become conscious of blues and of jazz. I fell deeply in love with this girl who went out with a bass player, a double bass player, in an outfit called Johnny Scott's, who were a jazz group. And she used to talk all the time about jazz, and in order to kind of keep up with her, I studied a lot of jazz and I started to listen to it, and I got to really like a lot of it. Yeah. And then I met this guy called Tom Wright, who was at college there in the photography school. He was from Alabama, and he had a fantastic collection of old blues records and a little nice stash of grass. And I got my introduction to the blues and also to a lot of other stuff too. Mose Allison, Ray Charles, Jimmy Smith, Jimmy Reed, Hooker. A lot of great music, all in 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
And The Who, up to that particular point, had only been really playing other people's music.
Mm-hmm.
And so really before the Beatles had emerged, and of course the Beatles had a quite strong roots in R&B, I'd already started to develop, this is in 1961-62, a bit of a knowledge of what lay behind rock music.
Mm-hmm.
I never got much into roots rock, apart from Bill Haley. I never liked Elvis very much, or his band. I thought his band was pretty shitty.
No.
I used to think the Jordanaires were awful. And didn't like Scotty Moore. But I did like Jimmy Burton, who played with Rick Nelson a lot. He was a big influence. But the guy that really influenced the sound that I ended up with was Hooker, Johnny Hooker. That really impressed me. Although I was listening to a lot of jazz and playing jazz at the time, I preferred that suited the mood of the time.
Mm-hmm. Was the Detours the group when Roger was playing the originally? And then that turned into the High Numbers?
That turned into The Who, and then we used the name High Numbers for about 6 months. Because we chose the name The Who a little bit prematurely. It was, it was too weird for a long time. So we used the High Numbers for a bit, and then the time came when we were able to use The Who again.
Mm-hmm. You recorded one single as the High Numbers?
Yeah. I'm the Face, it was called.
Yeah. That was on the UPD?
Yeah. In fact, there's a track called Zoot Suit, which I think is on the Quadrophenia album, from the music from the film, which will be out later this year. That includes quite a jazzy little guitar solo.
So was that single with the High Numbers your first experience in the studio?
No, we had done a thing in... Barry Gray is a electronic film music composer. Did music for stuff like we had a lot of space programs for kids television where they used models, and he did the music for that. And it was, he did a lot of popular film music, and he had his own small studio, and we did a demo there once. The first song I ever wrote, it's called "It Was You."
Really? So then, were you practicing pretty much? I mean, playing guitar and...
I didn't practice very hard, I kind of, because my father was a musician and he used to spend hours and hours every day playing stuff. I mean, maybe I rebelled against it. But to this day, my father's one of the fastest and most efficient readers. He can play things which symphony orchestra performers can't play on the clarinet when he's blind drunk. I don't know, I probably would have had a bit more passion for the technicalities of music if there'd have been a piano in the house, because I don't think music falls into place properly until you've conquered the keyboard. To actually discover a guitar player who can read and understands harmony and has managed to achieve that through the guitar, I think it's a very rare thing. Without some... I mean, if you go to a music college, what do they start by doing? They start by teaching you the piano. It doesn't matter whether you're learning the violin, the harp, anything. You start with the piano. And so I didn't really actually start to understand the fundamentals of music until I started playing the piano. And I didn't start playing the piano until I was 22.
Do you remember, I mean, the first time that you accidentally or purposely started breaking guitars? I mean, was that an unconscious thing at first? Just an accident?
No, what I used to do is I first I got into feedback. I invented the stacked amplifier. Marshall's are a company in Ealing where I lived. Jim Marshall's, his amplifiers are now famous.
Right.
Ripped off the design of the old Fender Bassman, the valve Bassman, the square one. Exactly. Total, complete rip-off. He waited until the day the patent ran out, and then bang, he was right in there. And I'd been developing it for 18 months, pre the patent running out. And in fact, it was only a pending patent anyway. I hadn't actually... But, there's a period of review, I think it's 15 years or something like that. And he started to manufacture amplifiers, and somebody in his store came up with the idea of building a 412 cabinet for bass, it was. And John Entwistle bought one, and I looked at it, and suddenly John Entwistle doubled in volume. So I bought one, and then later on I bought another one, and I stacked it on top of the other one. And I was using a Rickenbacker at the time, and of course, because the pickup was right in line with the speakers, I instantly troubled by feedback. But I really used to like to hear the sound in my ears. I didn't like it sort of coming out down there, because I felt if it was coming in my ear, I could get it louder to me, but it wasn't necessarily going to be louder out front. And I started to get quite interested in feedback, but I was very frustrated at first. I mean, there were a lot of brilliant young players around. Beck was around, who was even... I mean, I think Roger first saw him when he was in a group called the Triads, or the Tridents, or something. And he came back and he said that there was this incredible young guitar player. And Clapton was around, and various other people who could really play. And I was very frustrated because I couldn't do all that flash stuff. And so I just started to get into feedback and expressing myself physically. And it just led to one day I was banging my guitar around, making noises, and banging it on this ceiling in this club, and the neck broke off because Rickenbackers are made out of cardboard. And everybody started to laugh. They're all kind of going, "Hey, that will teach you to jump around like a lunatic and teach you to be flash." So I thought, what do I do? And I had no recourse but to completely look as though I meant to do it. So I smashed this guitar, jumped all over the bits, and then picked up my 12 string and carried on as though nothing had happened. And the next day the place was packed, the next time we went. And it just turned into another form of expression for me. It was a gimmick, of course, but it became... Guitar playing is stand-up guitar players. It is a very physical thing, you know. The way you feel and the way you move and the way you move your body and everything it's a big part of it. The fact that sometimes to actually pull a string up by the right amount, you have to give it some momentum and stuff like that. You can't play sitting down in the way that you can play standing up. And so for me, all that stuff, all that macho stuff, all became an expression. And I've never had any respect really for the guitar. I've respected guitar players, of course, you know, and I understand their need for a good instrument. But for years and years and years, I didn't care, you know, what the guitar was like.
Do you still feel that way?
A little less now. You know, I've got a couple of really nice instruments and I enjoy playing them. I'd never take them anywhere near a stage.
I know you've been asked before, but to your knowledge, you mentioned Jeff as one of the guys that were around. Do you think that you or he were one of the first to develop feedback? I mean, use it.
I think it probably happened. Well, to tell the truth, I mean, Dave Davis, Jeff, and me have got a tacit agreement that we will all squabble till the day we die that we invented it. I think possibly the truth is that it was happening in a lot of places at once. As the level went up, as people started to use bigger amps, and we were all still using semi-acoustic instruments, it started to happen quite naturally. But I think the development of it was something. It was like the word was around on the street that, and then Lennon used it at the beginning of that record. I can't remember. It starts with "Feel So Fine," is it?
I feel fine.
I feel fine.
Yeah.
And then it became really quite common. A lot of people started to use it.
How did you happen to choose a Rickenbacker?
I like the look of them.
Did you?
I think because the Beatles were using them. They picked theirs up in Germany. They were real German ones.
And then you kind of went through a succession. Like I've seen pictures with SGs and Les Pauls and Strats. And
I stayed with Rickenbackers for a long time, and then I started to use Fenders. I never liked Gibsons at all. Still don't very much. Then I started to get interested in a wide variety of guitars. I just tried anything, you know, that was around. I tried a Grimshaw I had for a while. It's an English guitar. I tried a semi-acoustic, an ES335, I think it's called, Gibson. And then I flitted around a lot. And then Hendrix came along, and I started to use Strats again. But that didn't last long because the sound of them wasn't quite right for what I wanted. And then Henry at Manny's introduced me to a guitar that had just been brought out. It's a Les Paul. I can't remember the name of it. It's one of the thin, I don't know what they even call them, the crimson colour, the cutaways like that.
Crimson. Oh, the SG.
SG,
Two horns, yeah.
And they just brought out a new model. I think this was in 1968 with a slightly larger wound pickup, and it really suited my amplifiers. And I started to use those. And they were a bit weak. That was the only thing about them. I could actually break them with my bare hands.
Yeah, you could even bend the neck
Yeah.
yourself.
But that's where I started to develop that technique. It's like you didn't need a tremolo arm because you could do it just by shaking the guitar. I got into this thing too of temper tuning the guitar with the second string flat.
Really?
And pulling back slightly on the guitar all the time to bring it into pitch, so that some of the higher chords, where you actually wanted that second string to voice a bit flat, you could relax the guitar and it would come out a bit flatter. Now, so I'm talking about the G string. When you're using a lighter G, see, I've never used light gauge strings. I just use heavy strings, top string 012 downwards, and 2 Bs instead of. There was an 016, is it? Or 014 for the second, I don't know, something like that. But just a standard set with 2 Bs. And I got that from Jimmy Burton. That's what you used to use. You used to use a standard set with a light third, that's all. That's the way I still play today. I can't stand light strings. You know, I had to struggle for it. Mickey Green, who was a guy I used to play with Johnny Kidd and the Pirates, and they've just recently reformed him in the Pirates, was a great exponent of the Jimmy Burton technique. And, you know, he used to have this incredible lyrical string bending thing going on, and I went up to him one day and I said, "What kind of strings do you use?" He said, What do you mean?" So I said, "Well, you know, what kind of, you know, if you've got a plain third," and I'm what? You know, he just had big hands. You know, he used to bend the third with a wound third, you know, like right up, you know, right over the back of the neck. And that was an affirmation to me that if you wanted to do it, you fought for it. You know, I hate that guitar sound where people sound like they can bend the string just by kind of thinking about it.
Yeah, right. That really is sound. Could you kind of give me a basic rundown on like, if you can remember, like the equipment that you used on the various albums, kind of quickly? Like,
I probably wouldn't be able to remember.
You couldn't remember? The My Generation album was still with the Rickenbacker though?
Yeah, I think I never used Marshall amps, I didn't like them. I had Fender amps. I had a Fender Pro and a Fender Bassman and 2 4x12s. Each one didn't drive its own speakers, it drove 2 Marshall cabinets, 4x12s. And I kept that set up for a long time. Then we used Vox amps for a little while.
Was that because of the Beatles? Or it was just
No, we did a deal. They're really rubbish. The AC30 is the only good amplifier they've ever made. And then I met this guy who was making amplifiers at the time for a company called Sound City. This is much later though. I really can't remember what the pace of the thing was. All I know is that once I found the high watt amplifier, I stuck with it. I tend to choose a guitar that fits that amp rather than the other way around. Where did I change? I think probably I got into high watt amps just after Tommy. No, I had them then. I must have been 1968, 67. I must have changed about that time.
From Fender to high watts.
Yeah.
Right. The end of Armenia City, there's like some reverse tape stuff. Was that the first time you had, or is that what it is, like the end? It sounds like tapes are being.
Yeah.
Was that the first time you'd worked with stuff like that? I mean, that's the first time it seems like I'd heard it on a Who record.
Yeah, possibly.
With that. And then Sunrise was like your first acoustic, major acoustic.
Oh yeah, Keith didn't want that on the record.
Really?
See, in a way, that's a bit of a giveaway to the fact that at the time I was sort of studying a bit of, you know, this jazz thing that I was into. I mean, at the time, I was still pulling that off. I was studying Mickey Baker methods, and I had 2 of his tutors, both of which are just magnificent. And it's all I've ever needed in a way to help sort of like get into slightly more complex chord work. And that song I wrote for my mother.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you remember it all the time?
Sure, I could write real music. You know.
Do you remember all the type of guitar it was, or type of
Yeah,
acoustic?
it was a Harmony 12-string.
Was it 12 string?
Yeah.
That's right. Lovely sound. I mean, you were already leading up to the kinds of things that you've been doing more recently.
Yeah.
You know, combining acoustic and electric, things like that. I think Magic Bus is like a good example of the way that you mix acoustic and electric guitars.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a process that you use, or something that you can explain how? I mean, the acoustic is so clear, and yet there's this huge electric guitars in the background. I mean, it's incredible.
I don't know how that sound occurred on the day. I think there were a couple of people playing, actually. It was a live track, that one.
That's right.
We just overdubbed the down, 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 down. But it was just a gang of us singing. Jess Rosen was there and a few other people.
Really?
A couple of people playing guitars. My guitar sound, my acoustic style is very, very Spanish influenced, and it's what I've always tried to do is try to develop a way that I can play very, very, very fast flourishes and still keep hold of the pick. And I developed a technique. This is only analysing backwards. I didn't consciously do this, but using quite a heavy pick, a large pick, not an enormous pick, just a standard like Manny type shape. And I float it in midair. I don't actually hold it. It's just floating between the fingers. And just somehow managing to not drop it. So that it's very, very loose and you can get a lot of... And a lot of that was a layover from the fact that I developed a lot of those techniques when I was learning the banjo.
Right.
You know, those trad banjo solos were always very syncopation. And I took that over to guitar. I think to get a clean acoustic style, I've read this somewhere, Chris Spedding said this recently, and I've often wondered why my chord work has got a particular stamp to it. And I think something that he said about what he does could be the answer. I always leave out the fourth. I think it's or the third or the fourth, I don't know what you call it. I think it's for the fourth.
Yeah, you couldn't leave out the third.
Yeah. And, you know, if I'm playing a major chord, for example, in A, I just play the A and the E. And I don't let I would not let the C sharp in. It wouldn't actually be in the chord. You'd never hear it. And when you go over to electric, what happens is that when you play a chord like that, the C sharp comes up as a harmonic because of the distortion. But it's clean distortion. If you actually play the C sharp, it clashes and you get into modulation distortion, which throws up other notes which you don't actually want. And I think that particular approach to electric guitar work transferred to acoustic guitar work, it's really quite interesting as a writer, because if you're playing basically what are two-note chords in octaves, it leaves you freer melodically, and it takes you back to much more sort of ancient music principles. It's almost like using the chord as a drone. And,
Like the beginning of Pinball Wizard, there's all those real nice chords. I mean, that's like a real stamp on the types of things that you do.
yeah, I got very into Baroque music, Purcell and people like that, and I started to be very interested in the fact that they use transitions, melodic transitions, very rarely, and there would always be suspensions, tension, and then it would drop every now and again, and then there'd be another level of tension and it would drop. And mainly Purcell, who's an English composer, and I really got deeply influenced And in fact, the beginning of Pinball Wizard, that chord sequence on the demo runs for about 15 minutes, and it's just an exploration of how many chords I could make with a running B. The B was in every chord. And went right through about 30 or 40 chords, very slowly, and then it went into the triangle.
That's great.
I'm a Boy, I did that as well,
Uh-huh.
in the solo.
Would you say that your guitar work on Live at Leeds was as good as you did at that point? In other words, like the solo stuff, I mean, it was really, some...
It's some nice stuff there. I mean, I don't know what possessed me to actually start to try to play like that. I suppose it just must have been the influence of Hendrix. Because up to that point, I just wasn't interested in single note work. It seemed mad for me to even try to compete with the likes of Beck and Clapton and Jimmy Page and people like that. And I mean, I first saw Jimmy Page when I was, I think, 14 or 15, and he was already in a professional band. He's 1 year older than me. He was in a professional band at 16, and he was earning £30 a week when I was just still in school, playing like really fast stuff. And Richie Blackmore was in a jazz band, not a jazz band. He was in the what are they called? They were in a kind of a heavy pop rock band, the Flea Wreckers or something like that, some kind of Ventures type outfit. And you just listen to records like that open-mouthed at the time, and there's no question of being able to play that stuff. But at one particular point, I think after Hendrix, I decided that it was worth trying to express myself through single note work. And I think a lot of the help was when Henry introduced me to that particular guitar.
SG.
The SG, yeah. It fitted my sound and had a lyrical quality to it, and because the neck was so uncluttered up the top, you could play high.
So was it a 68 SG, and was it new when you bought it?
Yeah, beautiful, brand new.
And those are the high watts you're using?
Yeah.
It's like 2 stacks of high watts?
Yeah.
Did you never seem to use any pedals or anything like that on stage, like wah-wahs or boosters or anything like that?
I always had a fuzz box, but that was only just to make a loud noise at the end. When I start smashing things up, just to keep the noise going. No, I can't stand clutter. I can't stand a guitar with too many switches on it. It confuses me. And also a pedal means that you've got to stand still to work it. I can't stand still. I sometimes use pedals at home, but the wah-wah pedal, I mean, Eric Clapton thought he discovered it. I mean, presumably somebody had made it, but I mean, if I'd have actually started to use the wah-wah pedal, Eric would never have spoken to me anymore. He was really put out that Jimi Hendrix used to use it. Can't use a wah-wah pedal, that's my trademark.
Do you use a wah-wah in Going Mobile, the solo? It sounds like a wah-wah, I can't tell.
No,
if it is.
it's one of the original crude guitar synthesizer.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's great.
Which ARP developed for me. This is way back. I used to have a big studio, still have Studio 2500 ARP. It was one of the first ever built. And they made me a guitar interface for it.
So
It just sounds like a duck, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sounds funny. So the Who's Next album was really the first album where you started working with synthesizers?
Yeah.
Synthesizers?
Yeah. It's around that time. I really got into
And you play piano?
synthesizer. I started to play piano reasonably early on, not when I was about 22. I was playing piano on the Who Said That album, I think, a couple of tracks.
Oh, really?
Can't Reach You.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was playing piano.
Who's Next was the first album that the group produced? Had a bigger part in?
Yeah. We did initial recording for Who's Next here in New York with Kit Lambert, who produced all that stuff up till then. and Kit was kind of getting a bit sick, and I was very sick. Both of us were suffering from mental and physical exhaustion, and Glyn was brought in to help out really at the last minute and to really remix the stuff that we'd done in New York and do overdubs. And he listened to it and he said, "It's great, it's good, but if we started again, I could do a lot better." And Glyn was really pitching to do this standout album. And we knew all the material, so it's just a simple matter of going in and playing. And every time we went back in, we were just getting astounded at the sounds that he was producing. And
for what it's worth, I think it's the best album that you've ever done.
yeah, I think so.
You did?
But a lot of the I mean, Barbara O'Reilly, for example, that synthesizer sequence I did at home.
It's fantastic.
And took that in. And Won't Get Fooled Again, the whole track I made at home.
Yeah, just the whole sound of the album is just like a whole new era for the band.
Yeah.
It's just so different.
It's the album that I try to look at as a standard in a way.
There's an echo on Won't Get Fooled Again. It's like some little solo things in there. It sounds like there's a repeat, that one little minor part in there.
I don't know.
I can't remember the part.
Probably something that Glyn did.
Yeah. Quadrophenia, there was a lot of solo stuff. I mean, lots of little bits and pieces.
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoyed that guitar work. A lot of. But then I enjoyed that whole album because I produced that single-handed.
Uh-huh.
And I enjoyed all the sound texture stuff and
Yeah.
exploration of themes and a bit of contrapuntal stuff.
Is that why you just credited with Rest?
Sorry?
On the album, it gives credit to Keith drums, Roger voices, John bass, Peter Rest.
Yeah. That's what I needed when I finished.
The end of The Real Me, I think when it goes in the Quadrophenia track, it's like some really nice blues guitar stuff there. I mean, some really nice stuff. Was that about the time when you were hanging around with Eric? I mean, I don't know, but was that about the time they did the Rainbow show? And I heard that you've been hanging out with Eric, and maybe
that was later, wasn't it? It was 74 after that.
Did any of Eric rub off on you? In other words, just watching him or getting,
You're joking. I had to sort of prop him up with lumps of wood. I had to teach him how to play again. The guy had shut himself away for the better part of 2.5 years.
Yeah, that's true.
And me and Lord Harlett, Dave Harlett, father of the girl that Eric was living with at the time, organised this concert. Bullied him into doing it. He didn't want to do it.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of the equipment that you were using on the Who's Next record? Some of the guitars, I mean, is it still basically the SG? Or?
No, what had happened then is I had a couple of really good lucky breaks. The first is that I came to Manny's again and told Henry I wanted a J200, and he brought out 20, brand new, and I tried all of them, and I found one superb guitar which I've still got, and that was what I used for that Pinball Wizard sound. Bloody great instrument. And Joe Walsh, who I'd met, sent me a orange Gretsch, like Neil Young uses, and a Fender Bassman amp. And with an Edwards pedal, volume pedal in between, I started to get into that kind of sound. Leslie West sent me a really great Les Paul Jr. one pickup on. Eric gave me an old Strat, I think. And I think in a way what these guys were trying to tell me was that, if I wasn't ready to go out and find myself a good guitar, they did it for me. They gave me good instruments, and I've still got those three instruments today, and those were really the guitars I used on that album. Mainly the solo work on Who's Next was done on a Gretsch Chet Atkins.
Do you use the hi-hats in the studio?
Not very often. No, I usually use either an old, really old Fender amp, or a PV vintage, or some copy of an old amp like a Boogie or something like that. I've also now got this device which is a preamp that I plug straight into the board, which I used a lot on Who Are You? Made by Guelph, just a preamp, and I just plug straight through that into a compressor and then straight into the desk.
You playing banjo on Squeezebox?
Yeah.
That come back from earlier banjo stuff you've been doing.
Yeah. I've got a really nice G banjo now, actually made by Fender. She's got Scruggs pedals on it, or their version of Scruggs heads. And I learnt how to do flat picking very early on. I used to listen to a lot of Chet Atkins and stuff like that. So I can do all that stuff.
Do you do any finger picking on acoustic?
Yeah, I can, yeah. I'm quite good at it, I'm not wonderful at it.
Do you use finger picks or just your fingers?
No, I use fingers. I can use picks. I obviously have to use picks on the banjo, but it takes me like a couple of days to get used to them and to forget that they're there. I just use the tips. My nails are lousy and I bite them, so I've never really had any nails. If I did have, I'd only knock them off on the stage anyway. So I always just use, soft sound.
You did the programming on the synthesizer on Who Are You? The track itself?
Yeah.
That was great too.
That's a very simple effect. I know when David Friend, who's the managing director, or the president, I suppose you call him here, of art, heard that, he rang up and he said, "Hey, great, guitar synthesizer, it's all happening, can we use it in ads?" I said, "Sorry, it's not, I didn't use the guitar synthesizer, I haven't had time to," because he gave me the Art Avatar number 1, 001. And I think I just used I plugged straight into a 2600 synthesizer, R, and just on a sort of auto pad effect.
So what is the main guitar and amp that you're using now, or say, what guitar and amp would you think of using when you come and do those dates?
For the last couple of years, and I think that's probably what I'll stick to, is I'm using Les Paul Deluxes.
Really?
Just standard guitars. And again, I usually have to go through about 20 to find a good one. And I've got about 6 or 7. I've tried customising them, I've tried other instruments, I've tried Hamer and Alembics and Ibanez, Yamahas, and these people all make guitars that are much, much better than Gibson these days. But the weight and the shape of the Deluxe, I've gotten into it now. Pickup suits the amp. The high level DiMarzios and things like that, they don't, which most of these guitar makers are now using, don't seem to suit my amplifiers. What I need is a fairly clean sound, and then the amp looks after the distortion. And a lot of these current modern guitars are made with the possibility to get a clean sound, if you like. That at a high level, it's a dirty sound, so you can get a dirty sound out of a modern transistor amp. I'm still using tube amps. So. And they're modified slightly. I put a DiMarzio pickup in the middle, but I never use it. In fact, I don't know why I bloody bother do it. I just like the way it looks.
So it has 3 pickups on.
Yeah.
Which model DiMarzio pickup?
It's the one that switches between
The super distorted, it has a little toggle that you.
Yeah. I sometimes use that in the studio. I've got one Les Paul that's got 3 of those on it, each switchable, you can get some very interesting sounds out of that. But what I've had most trouble with my current Les Pauls is the quality of the wood in the neck. It's kiln dried, and a lot of the resin gets dried out with the moisture, and I think it means that they, under the rough treatment that I give them, they don't seem to last very long. And I remember once an old mate of mine who used to work for Sun became the representative of PR man or something for Gibson, and he came to see me and he said, listen, why don't we do a deal with Gibson? And I said, well, you know, the day you can bring me a Gibson off the end of the production line, like this kid is going to have to save up his money for, and it's good, then I'll put my name to it. But, you know, he said, well, you know, we'll make you anything you like, and, you know, we'll get you special instruments. And I said, well, that's not the point, because, like, if I put my name on it, I'm putting my name on something that somebody's going to go out and buy off a production line. And if I pick up a guitar in a store, and say there's 6 there, and every one of the 6 is good, then maybe I'd consider putting the name on it. But I've never really done any deals on guitars. For a long time, people wouldn't do it because they didn't want. Gibson didn't do it. So when I could have afforded some help, they didn't want to give it, and so now I'm very touchy about doing that. I endorse boogie amps because they're handmade, and there's a lot of care goes into them, and I think they're good and they're cross, and they won't compromise the people that are making them. They won't, well, at least they haven't yet. They won't get into a commercial production line situation. And every one that I've tried has been exactly the same as the other one. It's obviously been carefully put together. They're not entirely to my taste. They're much more complicated than they look, boogie amps, and they're quite hard to get used to. But they're good. And, I don't get them for nothing. I wish I did. You know, I have to put my name on them to get one at all.
Yeah, that quality.
They're so rare, yeah.
So then, other than putting the DiMarzio in the deluxe, it's a stock guitar?
Yeah. Have you spoken to John Entwistle yet?
I did the guitar player cover on John.
Yeah, because I mean he's the guitar man. Got millions of them.
Yeah. So then you'll be using the high watts on stage?
Yeah. I just use 1 amp and 2 4x12s now.
Just one stack?
Yeah. No, I use a vertical stack. I've got 4 speakers, but the bottom ones are dead, the dummies. I use the bottom ones to stand on top ones. If they weren't there, I wouldn't feel right. Can you do us a favour and get some ice, could you, out of the freezer?
Have the high watt. Changed around at all in these speakers or stock?
I've tried various different speakers in the cabinets, but I couldn't tell you what's in them now, whether it's JBLs or Fames or Altex. I don't know what's in them. You'll probably find somebody's changed them, and I don't know, you know, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what I've got. I just know that I can't do without the amps. Thanks, sir.
They're really clean sounding amps, and really bright sounding.
They're because they've got a master volume. They're capable of. They're rather strange. The ones I use are actually a 4-input amplifier. You know, each one with its own volume control and master volume at the end, and they've only got treble and bass controls. And they're just a really sort of basic tube amp.
There's certain settings that you use on the amp, or is everything kind
I
of...
just use the input full up to get the distortion, and then turn the guitar down so that I can control the amount of distortion from the guitar, and the master volume about half up. So they're only rated 95 watts. They're good, they're really reliable. I rarely get any trouble on the stage.
I mean, you obviously like them more than Marshalls.
I've never used Marshalls really. I tried Marshalls for a while because we always had a deal with a very friendly relationship with that firm. I don't think it ever troubled them that I never used them. Everybody else did.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody. Eric, Jimmy Page, Jeff, everybody used them. Jimi Hendrix, when he came to England, used Marshalls. I never got on with them. I don't know why.
Yeah. So then you don't use any pedals on stage then?
Currently, just for this last 7 gigs that we did in Europe, I use an MXR compressor sustain unit now and again, but it makes such a hell of a noise when you put it on.
Does it?
Yes. I've got a facility in my stack to actually put in a regular studio compressor. But there's so much compression happening anyway in the chain that it's not really necessary. Mm-hmm. No, I don't really use anything. No. If I want an effect, I mean, Bobby Pridden, our sound man, all I have to do is just look at him and he knows exactly what I want. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a phase-in sound or multi-echo or ADT or, sort of reverb fading in and out with the notes. We've been working together now for 15 years, and the guy, apart from anything else, we both can lip read. So he can be right in the middle of a song, and I just said to him, what I fancy for this guitar solo coming up now is a bit of ADT, like, coming in and out on the, blah, blah, blah. Okay, ready, go. And we can do that. And so I can usually get what I want back through the monitors.
Mm-hmm. Do you know like the gauges and types of strings and picks that you use?
Well, I know what picks I use. I use Manny's mediums.
Mm-hmm.
And I use Gibson Sonomatic strings. Medium gauge, just with a gauge.
Mm-hmm.
That's an 012 on and an 06 something on the, I don't know. And like I said, I don't use, I think I use an 018 on the G and an 016 on the B now.
So then you're not using 2 Bs then?
No, I've started to make the third a little bit heavier. I think that's it, 012, 016, 018. I don't know what the rest are.
Where did, did the heavy, you attack the strings really heavily. Your attack is heavy. Did that come from, like you mentioned, the banjo and stuff like that? You really, when you hit the strings, it's like a lot
Yeah,
of
I think
force.
it is again. It's like I said earlier. I think it might be a kick-off from banjo work. I don't know. I know that I really have to go over every guitar that I take on the stage very, very aggressively to weed out dodgy strings. I've got a guitar man that works for me now, and what he does is he'll put a set on, new set every night, and stretch them right down, and to the really practically to breaking point. And then I come in a couple of hours later, and I always manage to get a few more semitones out of them, then tune it up, and usually they just about last the show. If I'm lazy or he's lazy and we decide, we'll keep those strings on, always in the first or second number, they break. I've actually had things where on the first chord, that's another reason why I can't use light strings. Every time I've tried to do it on the stage, they tend to snap. the higher ones.
Do you use any special tunings?
Rarely. I like experimenting with tunings, but only really for the purpose of composition, not on the stage. I discovered quite an interesting tuning about 2 years ago, which is to string the guitar up, the acoustic up like a banjo, G banjo. So it goes G, D, G, is it? And then another low, high D. So the D at the top is high. The G and the D at the top are high. The only interesting thing about that is when you use normal flat picking techniques, like ding da ding 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 ding, that kind of thing, the triplets come out with a high note first. But to most guitar players that wouldn't really be of much interest, because if they wanted to pick backwards they could do it. It's just that I can't pick backwards. I can't pick from the top. I can't go da 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 da. I don't know why I can't do it that way round. I can do it the other way.
Are there certain chord forms that you like using? In other words, like your rhythm stuff, are there certain kinds of bar forms that you use? Or
There's only one classic chord that I couldn't live without, and that's that basic A chord, the A chord that you hear at the front of Won't Get Fooled Again, and in possibly practically every song on Quadrophenia, the yagadang noise, which is just an A, just a two-finger thing, and I play, like I say, I play the A. I play on all 6 strings, but with no C sharp. So
you're playing an E, an A, an E, an A,
and
no C sharp,
and an E and an A.
E and A.
In other words, I play like that. I pick up the E again up there.
Okay. Yeah.
That's, in a sense, that chord is like just the backbone of everything that I do. Followed closely by a G, followed closely by a D, and then back to the A.
You like using like D chords and like moving them up and using like the lower strings, the strings on top to drone, things like that. And
I used to do a lot
Pizzatami,
of that.
things
I've
like
stopped doing that more now. Like I said earlier on, like around that period and before that period, like from about Substitute onwards, I became very interested in
yes, that's just
the drone.
Yeah.
You know. I listen to a bit of Indian music, and I think that influenced me. But country music has got a drone going through it as well, you know. And I'm quite, you know, that, what do they call it? They call it pedal bass. But of course, on guitar work and banjo work, it's not really a bass; it's just a running note that runs right the way through all the chords. I broke free of that when I started to really get to grips with the piano. I think still when I pick up the guitar to compose, I still tend to do a bit of that. I have to watch out that I don't get stuck into that Red Indian noise.
So most of the songs on Who Are You were done on piano then?
Who Are You I wrote on guitar. Sister Disco I wrote on a combination of synthesizer and guitar. I think the rest was written on keyboard.
Your solo stuff, do you work from certain runs or scales or patterns?
No, not really. I really am still a very crude player, and on a recording session, one of the nice things is that I can just drink half a bottle of brandy and spend a couple of hours experimenting, and often the best things that I do are accidents, complete accidents. Just go for it, if it happens. If I play a safe guitar solo, if I try and set out to do something safe, I can't pull it off, because I haven't actually got any formal approach to it.
Looking back, are there certain solos that you like and that stand out for you?
My favourite, my own solo at the moment that I like the best is the solo on My Baby Gives It Away. No, what is it? On the Rough Mix album. Heart to Hang On To. I really like that guitar solo, because that was just an off the wall thing. Uh, I'm starting to play better now, so I should have been playing a long time.
So does not having like the technique of someone like a Becker Page, it's never really. I mean, does it bother you? I mean, would you like to have that technique maybe to express yourself better as a guitarist? Or
No,
I realize you're.
not really. Sometimes in the past it's made me a bit catty towards that kind of player. Catty through a certain amount of jealousy, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Really, the thing is, I've never really. I suppose I've never respected them that greatly. There are only sort of odd records that Beck and Page have come up with that I've really liked, and it's. And I've never seen myself really as part of that. I've never invited comparisons to that kind of player.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said before, you've got your Erics and Jimi Hendrix and Jimmy Page and Richie Blackmore and people like that, and Jeff, who are out there doing that particular thing. But I feel myself in a slightly different place. And even today, I would never want to get into a guitar battle with people of that kind.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always, because for me, ultimately, the joy that I would get out of expressing myself through a solo would never be as great and never be as fulfilling as the joy that I would get out of expressing myself with a song.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It would never be as complete. It's temporary.
You can tell me if this is false or not. I don't know if somebody told me or they read it that you wish that you played like Jeff Beck, but Jeff Beck wishes he could write songs like Peter Townsend. I mean,
I might have said that. I said some really shitty things about Jeff Beck a couple of years ago, which I now regret.
he's a hard person.
I kind of went through a very punchy period just before the new wave thing happened because I was getting very fed up with the way music just seemed to be getting very boring and the same old stuff all over again. And I got a bit sort of depressed. And I was just hitting out at everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, does he? Does he give a shit? I don't know. Have you ever met Jeff Beck?
Yeah.
I can't imagine he could give a shit about writing songs like that. No, I don't want to play like him. I know very popular in the States that just after Woodstock, The Who had a big revival of interest in Tommy. And in the same, a lot of people used to come and see us and they used to say, in Britain it used to be, you are our favourite group with Deep Purple. I used to go, huh? And over here it used to be, you are our favourite group with 10 Years After. And both groups I hate. They're all the people in the bands are very good friends of mine, and but I hated their music, and it was very hard to live with in a way that we were being lumped in with these, like with Deep Purple, with this incredible sort of heavy metal, and it was because Richie Blackmore used to sort of bash his guitar on his head and sort of smoke a cigarette through his teeth and play a mouth organ back to front and all this. And that was really what people were in. And of course with The Who it was smashing up pyrotechnics, and with 10 Years After it was that like backwards tape Chinese guitar playing. And I've, in a sense, I've just never really ever wanted. I used to listen to people like Kenny Burrell and Wes Montgomery and
That's Paul.
I hate those people.
Really?
Chet Atkins. I mean, clear thinkers, and I've never liked flash playing really. I don't mind flash performance. I don't mind showmanship, as it were. Guitar circus. But when I was young, I used to listen to a hell of a lot of Charlie Parker, and Charlie Christian Williams. And when you've heard him play the way he did, as fast as he did, but without any flash at all, pure expression of the soul, literally flying above everything else. Why even bother to attempt to try to come close, you know? And for me, I feel I'm on the ground, physical, I'm a writer, really. Words are really what I'm about. And, you know, I wouldn't even attempt to try and approach that. And I think that it's kind of impetuous sometimes for some people to imagine that they can think that fast, and be that aloof and detached. But people, I suppose there's still people that... Who was it? I was listening to there's a new guitar player that I just heard recently. What's his name? Young guy.
A new band?
No, he's just a guitar player. He doesn't sing much on this record.
His own album.
Sorry?
He has his own album.
Yeah. Leslie something?
Not Motley right now.
I was really quite impressed with his style. The great fluidity, you know, it's almost like he's playing fast, but you feel he's ahead of himself.
Larry Carlton?
Larry Carlton.
Was it?
Yeah.
I like his stuff.
Yeah. I don't necessarily like the music, but I enjoy. It's effortless to listen to him. You know what I mean? He pulls off those sort of high things. It's like when Joe Walsh does one of his, and it's very lazy, but it's actually really quite a complex stunt to pull off. But it just manages to make it feel so lazy. I feel Joe's a very expressive guitar player, and he's brought out a lot of expressiveness in the other guy that plays with the band. Is it Don Feldman? The other guitar player. You know, they've got themselves each other at it. And I like Pat Martino a lot. I particularly like that album Star. I like it because I like the synthesizer work. But when it comes to it, you know, the thing that really sort of opens the ears up is when I hear somebody go, yagga-dang, yagga-dang, yagga-dang.
Do you listen to other guitar players to listen to the type of rhythm, types of things that they do? Well, there's very few guitar players and then there's rhythm players. I mean, you're certainly, you know, one of the best. I mean, someone like Keith Richards or, I don't know, Steve Marriott, maybe from the Pie, you know, just...
Well, I think my biggest influence in that area was Keith Richards. I still really like the way he plays, but I think on that particular area of work, I don't think I'm touched. There's nobody to touch me. And I mean, what's really strange is I don't think there's many people who've actually really heard me playing with them in the function of a rhythm guitar. And that's really where I really get off very well. You know, I wouldn't object at all to have a guitar player in the Who.
Really?
So that I could just concentrate on rhythm, because I love it. You know, I love it's part of that physical thing. It's like a dancing thing, and a strong syncopation element in it. And you know, there's no guitar player that I've ever worked with that hasn't said it. You know, Jimi Hendrix, Steve Stills, Eric, they've all just said, you know, it's just great to play with you there. And although I like having a play now and again, it's just nice to, I don't know, it's like, I suppose it's a bit like what it must be like to feel like a drummer or a bass player. Why do they do it? Why don't they want to be out there in the front line? I don't know. And that's something I feel when I'm actually playing rhythm with somebody else. One of the anomalies of the Who is that I'm doing that kind of thing, but I'm also out front doing it. A bit like Inez Fox or something. Like there's a certain style that McCartney produces when he's playing the piano, due to the fact that he's left-handed. That ding 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 that he does with his left hand.
Yeah.
He does, and I just picked up that particular way of playing.
Uh-huh.
And it's what's interesting in our group is that of course the roles are reversed. I mean, John's the lead guitar player. Although I'm not the bass player, I mean he does produce a hell of a lot of the lead work. It's really still funny to this day, you know, when we do like a song like Dreaming from the Waste, when John's doing this blinding fucking bass stuff, blinding, he's going like making Alvin Lee look like he plays in slow motion, and I'm just standing there going, and all the audience are looking at me going, how can he do it? How is he producing that noise? And John's over there. And of course, John won't demand attention.
Yeah.
Not like the guy in Earth, Wind and Fire.
John, some of that same story when you guys first started performing My Generation live, and you do the bass solo, we're all looking, and you say, how does he do that without moving his hands?
Well, you see, for years, nobody even noticed John was there. He used to wear all black. Nobody ever put a lamp on him. If we went on TV, he never appeared, unless the camera was whipping from Roger to Keith, you know.
Was it difficult at first playing with Keith and John as a rhythm section?
No, I've always felt,
Real comfortable.
yeah. Again, I think, you know, that's one of the reasons why my style has always been very formally rhythmic. You know, I've laid down the beat and Keith and John have worked around it, to some extent. I mean, John's not that syncopated all the time. But I used to play almost with Keith's bass drums, and John used to play with the top kit. Normally it's the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's one of the interesting things about the Who sound, and it's still happening even with Kenny.
Is it?
Yeah, John and Kenny work out things on the toms. You know.
So it didn't cause you to have to change your style at all?
No. I think I would work with any drummer that way.
I understand that you're supposed to be working on a new solo record?
Yeah, started writing for it a while ago. Getting stuck in as soon as I get back. Using. I think Chris Thomas will probably produce it. He's an old mate of mine. When I did the Wings thing, I met him again and we chatted about what we'd like to do. I don't really need a heavy producer, I just need somebody that's going to discipline me to get the thing moving.
What kind of a guitar sound do you look for when you record? I mean, can you put it in words, the kind of sound that you want?
Well, when I work at home, you know, I've got a studio of my own, I tend to just plug it in, stick up any mic and play. And I like different kinds of sounds, you know, I don't really go for any particular sound on acoustic. When I play electric, in order to play and express anything, I think I have to have a reasonably fluid sound. That's the only way I can describe it. But it's not a sustained noise. It's got to be reasonably razor sharp and jagged to get the chords across. I don't know, one of the difficulties that I've had with changing amps is that, you know, when a builder comes in and says, listen, I'll build you the amp that you want, what do you want? And I'm going to go, what do I want? I don't really know what I want.
Is that the way a Who song usually evolves, to come in with a demo or a rough?
Yeah.
Do you put all the parts on there? I mean, you put drum parts on there?
Yeah.
Bass, vocals? They've always worked like that?
Yeah. I put all the parts on, all of which they ignore.
So then when a song is finished, I mean, it's pretty much exactly what you've heard.
No, the band. If it's right on the demo, then the band aren't too proud to do it the same way again. But what's good about doing demos actually is that you've made a commitment to a particular sound. If there's something wrong with it, it's going to be very evident, so you don't make the same mistake twice.
When you're in the studio, is it...
John makes demos too of his stuff.
Does he?
Writes, yeah. It's exactly the same way. It comes in with his finished masterpieces. We wonder why we bother to re-record them again.
He really does that good a job on like the demos.
Yeah.
I mean, do you encourage John and everybody to write? Will you accept nothing less than something that you would be capable of writing? In other words, if it's not right, will you say to him, it's not there, or will you try to rework it? Or
I wouldn't be that aggressive because I feel that there's only two writing individuals in the Who. That's me and him, and I think we write in very different areas, and we're evolving differently. And I really welcome his input at every level. And I know that over the years he's played on a lot of stuff that I've written that he hasn't particularly liked or felt was good, and it's worked out well. So at the demo stage, I wouldn't criticise it then. I'd say, well, let's have a go at it. Let's see what happens. And then I think it's fundamentally obvious if it doesn't turn out well. Generally, because I'm such an enthusiast of demos anyway, and other people's demos, I like everything that he does. Some things, it's fundamentally obvious that it's not going to work. Like with my own stuff, I might take in, say, 4 or 5 tracks, put them up, and when listening to them at home, I've been thinking, well, these are all perfect for the band. But as soon as you sit there with the other guys, you suddenly realise, God, what was I thinking of? This is no good at all. It's too personal, or it's just the wrong kind of sound, or you hear the opening, you think, God, Roger's going to hate this. Then he says he hates it. I've heard you go through the same thing. I think if you make a film or make a record, you don't really hear it at all. You hear it for the first time when you hear it with people sitting there listening to it. You suddenly put yourself in their shoes.
So when you're in the studio, is it basically like, will you lay down like a rhythm guitar as part of the rhythm track, and then just go over and overdub vocals and solos?
We try to have as full a sound on the track as possible, but it is usually just the rhythmic elements. Usually going with a keyboard player. A more rare occurrence is to go in with another guitar player. But we might put down bass drums, acoustic piano and acoustic guitar, or electric guitar, acoustic piano, bass and drums. Or we might go in with a guide track tape or synthesizer tape and do, synthesizer tape, guitar, bass drums, that kind of thing. Always got 4 elements. We've always worked with 4 elements right since the second album. No, since the first album. On the first album we had Nicky Hopkins in there with us. Something about recording that diminishes the power of a 3-man group, and you have to have the extra harmonic element.
Whose records have always been real big in live sounding. I mean, you've obviously mastered that. Even for just a 3-piece.
Yeah.
You haven't done that much recording with other guitar players, have you, on record?
No, I don't think I have.
When you do solos, will it take you, like you say, you'll sit down and drink a little? Does it take you many stabs at a solo before you come with something you're happy with?
No, it doesn't take long. It's because I don't hit the aim very high. So like I was saying before, I don't.
Pretty soon? Okay. Is there anybody that you haven't worked with that you'd like to work with? Either a player or a technical person?
Uh, I don't know. For a long time, I wanted to work with Todd Rundgren,
Yeah.
and I asked him to produce my solo album, actually, which he agreed to do. And then I suddenly realised that it probably wasn't a good idea, because we're so, although it's not all totally evident, we're so alike in a lot of ways. And but I would like to work with him. I don't know whether what I don't know
I
what.
think it'd be fantastic. You approach as a songwriting or similar. I mean,
A lot of things are similar. I think he's a better guitar player than me and a better singer. But I think that what really worried me a little bit about the prospect of him producing my solo thing was just uh, the fact that I'm influenced by him enough as it is. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
And I like the way I'm influenced by him at the moment. Like I think on Sister Disco, I think some of the influences sort of kind of show a little bit in the vocal style. In particular, a song I wrote quite recently, which hasn't appeared yet, it's got a very strong sort of Todd Rundgren influence. So I listen to his music all the time and enjoy his production work. I don't know whether I'm doing the right thing or not, but I decided it probably wouldn't be a good thing to work with him. I'm going down to see Springsteen tomorrow to meet him for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think I've got any. I like working with The Who, you know. I mean, I've done things where, I mean, on the Tommy soundtrack album, which I directed, I work with all kinds of people that I've never worked with before. And I do a lot of production work. At every level, at documentary level, demo level, finished productions and stuff like that. Orchestral sessions, and so I get quite a lot of excitement out of the work, music.
Last question. You're pleased with the kids are all right?
Yeah,
I
I'd
mean,
say so.
it's a real great cross section of the band is. What about the movie, which I haven't seen, so I can't comment?
You haven't seen it yet?
No, I haven't.
Well, it's not exactly a documentary of the Who or its history or anything like that. It's just a collection of whatever was really available. Some of it's TV trash, some of it's very good live footage, and some of it's very bad live footage. Kind of a bit of everything. It's fun though, I think. I enjoy it because it's light. You'd almost imagine that a film about the Who would have to contain something that was, in order for it to be any good at all, would have to contain something really quite self-examining or serious or pompous about rock and roll, but it doesn't. It gets away with it. It's a film about the group, not me. And it's good.
And Quadrophenia's coming out later this year.
Yeah, September.
I mean, you're looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a major project.
Yeah. We don't appear in the film, and there's not a hell of a lot of music in it, but it's a powerful film. I'm very proud of it.
Okay.